The first thing we're going to cover today is who is this course geared for, and even in a broader sense, who tends to make for a good software sales rep. So first off, and most importantly, I would say, is someone with a growth mindset. Not only is the world of sales and how to engage with people always changing, so is the industry of software. So software, for context, it's not like a competition kind of like Target and Walmart where there's, constantly slight edging. The world of software, you'll have market dominance, you'll have the majority of all people using your software, and then someone will come in and blindside you. And so it's imperative that any software company that stands a chance to move quickly, to move aggressively. And so in order to succeed in software sales, you have to be willing to constantly be learning. How can you do better? How can you improve? At the very least, because you're going to get a lot of rejection over the course of working in sales, you will put in a lot of hours only to hear people tell you, not for me. And if you keep doing the same thing over and over, your amount of deals closed is going to remain pretty close to zero. Whereas if your mindset is to constantly grow, hey, I'm where I'm at now, but I'm not always going to be there because I'm going to work hard to grow. That's the kind of person that's really going to stand out in the world of software sales. That is who is going to find success the quickest, as well as probably to the greatest extent. Now, the thing I love about sales is it really is the great equalizer. When I tell people that I work in software sales, one of the most common response that I get is, "Oh, you must be like really technical then, right?" No. I was not good at math in high school and college. I'm not highly analytical. I'm not great at attention to detail. As I mentioned, I was an average student. However, that is not what is of most utmost importance. Because in software sales and in sales in general, typically you don't need a college degree. In fact, even many of the companies that say in the application that you need a college degree, they won't require it. They just do that so that either people with a college degree apply, or those that have the ambition to apply anyway, they'll filter those people in and everyone else out. And so the beautiful thing about sales is while I see people with PhDs making $12 an hour at a coffee shop, I have many, many friends who do not have any college degree, not even an associate's, who are making six figures every single year in software sales. It's not about how many degrees you have. It's not about having enough money to put yourself through college. And it's really just a matter of, are you willing to work for it? And are you willing to continue to adapt? Those are vital. And so another big component of what it takes to be good at sales, like oftentimes there's this mindset that if you're a salesperson, you're a sleazebag, or if you don't want to go into sales, or you don't want to engage with a salesperson because they'll sell you a bad bag of goods, sort of a thing. And with the rise of the internet, sure, there's always going to be some bad apples. There will be in any industry, in any career path. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. However, now it's like if there's a bad software, one that's not good, there's online reviews. Just like there are for restaurants. It's not as though you can get away with being a bad or insincere salesperson anymore. Those salespeople fizzle out very quickly, frankly, because they just get bounced around from company to company because because they may sell one or two deals, but they don't have the legs in order to keep it going because their reputation gets shot. And especially with LinkedIn, where the whole world is networked together, which we'll get into later, they're done for. And so another thing it takes to be a great software sales rep is a genuine desire to help people. In fact, one thing that I have found, and it's not only my experience working in the food service, but I have found a significant, it's actually, working in the food industry is a great pathway into, or setting you up for success as a software sales rep. Working in the food industry, you're expected to work at a fast pace, sometimes with unfriendly people. You have to learn to strike up conversation with people, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 110 years old. You need to learn to be friendly, even when you're really not feeling it. You need to be prompt. There's so many skills, especially people skills, that I learned and many people learn working in food service that are directly transferable into being a successful software sales rep. Now, it's not always easy, it's not always sunshine and rainbows working in sales. Everyone knows that. But just to reiterate, in order to be good at software sales, you either need to have a thick skin or be willing to develop a thick skin. And that's in part because you deal with a lot of rejection, like I mentioned. I've had countless people hang up on me. I've been cussed out a couple of times. I've had people who said that they would sign a contract with me and therefore I'd make a lot of money, who ended up backing out. Like, rejection is part of it. Now, yes, there's any company that I would recommend or any position I'd recommend taking for myself or for yourself is going to have a base. It's going to have a salary or hourly. And so you don't go starving if you don't make the deal. I'll get more into that later. But you need to be willing to stomach and not take personally rejection. Now, for me, I tend to think of it almost like a game. Not that this happens really anymore because I don't do cold calling per se anymore, but when I most recently would do cold calls, and when I'd get hung up on or some kind of a negative experience would happen, I would almost turn it into a game. Instead of personifying it or personalizing it and, oh, they didn't like me, oh, all these negative thoughts, I would immediately switch into a mindset of, okay, I took this approach. I wonder what would happen if I made a minor tweak, and almost made a game out of it. And that helped me not only improve, but that also helped me begin to associate the negative response to an outside extrinsic factor as opposed to me personally. So if I'm honest, I had to develop a thick skin because I don't feel like I grew up having a thick skin. But that is something that can be developed. Additionally, another reason you need a thick skin is oftentimes sales reps go through droughts. Like, there will be extended period of time in which your manager is getting on you, like, why haven't you closed anything lately? Why haven't you set a meeting recently? What's going on? And a good manager will help you diagnose why and help you improve, but there's still, you feel a lot of pressure to meet your number, to meet your calls, to etc. There are certain things in sales that you can control. How hard you work, how much effort you put in. Ultimately, though, there are also things that you cannot control. When they sign, if they sign, there are a lot of things that you can do to improve the odds, but there are always going to be things outside of your control. And so droughts are something that you need to develop positive habits, which we can get into another time, but develop positive habits to help maintain composure even during droughts. Lastly, as far as developing a thick skin, oftentimes in the software world, not only does the software company that you'd be working at work at a fast pace and kind of can tend to be pretty direct, the sales organization can also tend to be pretty intense. Like, it's a very common saying, what have you done for me lately? Oh, you closed a big deal last month? That's great, congratulations. It's a new month, you're back at zero. So again, it's something that can be developed, but it is something to be aware of. And amidst all of that, the rejection, the working in an intense culture, potential droughts, it is so important to maintain positivity. Whether you call it optimism, realism, but with a positive edge, like you need to be able to be in a mental space so that you are able to cope with all of the negative things I just laid out, as well as portray that when you're on a call with people. The reality is, whether you're meeting in person, over Zoom, or just on a phone call, you can pick up, even just by the tone of someone's voice, whether they are in a positive mood or more of a negative mood. And people want to connect with positive people because that emotion kind of conveys, in a sense, to themselves. Whereas if you think about the last grumpy person you had an interaction with, you probably felt like, I can't get out of here fast enough. So not only do you need to learn to develop a thick skin, but also be a positive person while having a thick skin. Now, ultimately, selling is not about bribing someone. It's not about selling someone a bad bag of goods, like I mentioned. It's about adding value to people and company, not pitching a product. So as we go through this course, as you begin thinking about what does it mean to be a salesperson, again, average to bad salespeople try to sell the product. They try to sell the same product to every person, regardless of whether there's a slight need for it or a really strong need for it. A really good and successful sales rep is going to be able to understand how the business works, which again is something that's education that you can develop while on the job. But a good sales rep is going to begin to learn and understand the business's challenges, and how their solution, their software, can help solve the problem. Whether that's reducing lost revenue, whether that's increasing sales, whether that's reducing the amount of employees that churn, etc. There's software solutions for pretty much everything at this point. But that is going to be of vital importance. If you find yourself pitching a product, you're doing it wrong. So the next thing I want to cover with you is really why go into sales in the first place. We've already laid out what kind of personality, what kind of person tends to make successful sales reps, and a lot of that, frankly, can be developed, which again goes back to that great equalizer comment. I don't care if you are introverted or extroverted. Either way, you can be a fantastic sales rep. I don't care if you grew up wealthy or grew up in the slums. You can be an incredible sales rep. And so let's get into why sales, and more specifically, why software sales. And honestly, this is where it starts getting fun. So by way of framing it, and I will, there's so many acronyms that I will say the name, what the actual acronym stands for, and then I'll be using the acronym going forward, and I'll also make available a list of acronyms with their definitions, not only for the remainder of this course's sake, but also as you go through the interview process and begin your career in software sales. I always like to help those that I'm mentoring to be more prepared than is needed, rather than find themselves being blindsided. So just by way of a heads up on that front. So quick kind of 101 level of what is software. So while hardware is something physical, tangible that you can touch, like a computer, like a monitor, like a mouse, software is actually what goes on the computer, whether it's actually living on the computer or whether that lives in a cloud. A lot of software nowadays is cloud-based, which oftentimes that's referred to as SaaS, S-A-A-S, which stands for software as a service. This is something that, there's debate over it, but we'll say Bill Gates started the concept where instead of a company buying the software and then needing to buy the update a few years later, the thought is you're more like renting it. You're renting the software from the company, and they are the ones who are constantly rolling out updates so as to make it better and drive additional value. So primarily when I'm talking about software sales, I'm talking about software companies that have a SaaS subscription, which in essence, what that means is if I sell my software, my company software to another company, they are paying X amount of dollars every single year to use that software to improve their business. Okay. So one of the reasons I love software is because ever since it got on that more rental SaaS model, the margins are outrageous. Because the reality is companies have major problems, and when you can solve these major problems that is ultimately saving them a lot of money, which we'll get into, there's a significant amount of profit margin, especially when you're just renting out or allowing people to subscribe to the software. Again, we'll get more into that in just a moment. But why sales? Like, why does sales notoriously pay a lot of money? Every company comes to a point where they realize the same thing that Edison and many other inventors realized. If you build it, they won't come. Every invention, pretty much, that we have today, that we've used over the course of the centuries, was invented, but ultimately it was salespeople who had to get the general public to use it. In fact, Edison had to install and give away his first set of light bulbs because nobody wanted them. Same thing with a printing press, same thing with a cotton gin, same thing with most inventions. And so the challenge is you can have this great idea for a new software if you're trying to start a software company, but the reality is if you don't have salespeople, it's just a matter of time before you run out of money, because no one is going to say, hey, I am actively looking for a solution that doesn't exist. Have you created it yet? Does that make sense? That is what the role of the sales rep is to understand other businesses' challenges and who their company software is best able to fit the need of, and to make that happen. And so ultimately, not only are sales reps vital to the companies that they work for, they're basically their own militia, but they're also vital to any country's economy, because the more money that transacts, the bigger companies grow, the more money that the government ends up being able to collect, etc. So sales reps are paid very well, but for very good reason. And this is a good point in the conversation to change kind of the thought process that most people have, where the amount of money you make is based on the amount of hours you work. Even if you work at, let's say, fast food, right? And you're making $14 an hour or whatever, that is still not a measure of how much your hours are worth to the general population, but rather that is based on a significant amount of math averaged out over hundreds, if not thousands of people. That is what they have found that they can afford to pay for the amount of work that is typically being done in an hour. And what that also means is if you can contribute more value and you're in a company that understands, recognizes, and appreciates the value that you contribute, there's literally no limit to how much you can earn. So talking about compensation, let's say, for example, would you pay $100 for $1,000? I have one, you have one $100 bill, I have 10. Do you want to buy my 10? Okay. That is conceptually what a company is doing when it staffs salespeople. Let's say they pay them $100,000 a year, and their goal is that sales rep, they're paying them $100,000 a year, but they're going to be making them $1 million a year. Again, that's why sales reps get paid so much, especially when the profit margin is there. So by way of example, if my company A, helps company B increase how much they sell by $100,000 a year. So the company B, after I make that sale, they're going to be making $100,000 more a year than they were before because of the solution that my software provides. Do you think company B would be wise to invest, say, $20,000 into my software? $20,000 to get $100,000? Yeah, that seems like a fairly wise decision. Now, let's look at it from my company's A's perspective. If I, as a sales rep, am getting another company to pay them $20,000 per year going forward, do you think it makes sense for them to pay me $5,000 for my trouble making that deal happen? Yeah, you better believe it does. And again, that's part of why the profit margins in software sales are as high as they are, because it's not just about getting them to use it the first year. It's a matter of they sign up and the expectation is that our software is good enough that they will want to renew year after year after year. So maybe it's $20,000 the first year, but over 5 years, that's $100,000. Make sense? That's why I love not only sales, but that's why I love software sales. And as a quick side, if I get paid $5,000 to close a $20,000 deal, is there any reason that math doesn't make sense if I help them close a $100,000 deal or a $500,000 deal? If I am able to get a company to pay my company $500,000 every single year, how much does it make sense for my company A, to pay me? You get where I'm going with this, right? There's really no limit to how much you can earn as you get further and further into software sales. And it's not this like voodoo, it's not this like mid-level marketing, it's not anything kind of scammy. Like that's why I took that amount of time to lay out why the compensation is so high, because if you kind of understand and kind of reframe that the amount of money that you're worth to a company is not based on how many hours you work, but based on how much money you are making them, it makes a whole lot more sense that you can make a whole lot more money by making the company that you're working for a whole lot more money. One common concern that people have when going into, well, frankly, any career, but also sales, is that of job security. Honestly, that is one of my favorite concerns that I hear people talk about. Among the Gen X, the boomers, the older generations, the thought process was, if possible, get a job with the government, because they will give you pension, they will take care of your retirement, you work for 35, 40 years, and you're set for the rest of your life. Well, pensions are shot. The amount of money that you can make working for the government tends to be significantly less than that which you can work or make in private sector. And the reality is we've seen in the past even 5 years, multiple government shutdowns, which has significant negative ramifications to job security for even government employees. And so what I want to do is kind of reframe this concept of job security for you. See, job security in our parents' and grandparents' generation, job security was thought as get connected to a good company because it's from the company that this job security is going to come from. That's not how it works anymore. Job security in today's economy is attached to what value can you contribute to other companies. You see, where I'm at right now in my career, I'm like 8 or 9 years into working in software sales. If my company were to go bankrupt or fire me for some reason, I'm not stressed at all. And it's not just because they pay me well, but it's because I know without a shadow of a doubt that the amount of skills that I have learned, like I mentioned, the importance of sales, if you build it, they will not come automatically. Like, I'm a walking militia. if I get fired or if my company goes under, there are going to be countless companies eager to hire me, and they'll probably pay me more anyway. So I feel like I have all the job security in the world because I have developed these valuable skills that other companies need and that are directly tied to companies earning money. See, the way I think of it from a job security standpoint is the more responsible you are for making companies money, the more money that they're going to be willing to pay you. So salespeople, for that purpose, tend to get paid significantly more money than, say, if you work in support. So people who work in support are vital to any company. However, that's not where companies are wanting to invest their additional resources because they want to make more money. Does that make sense? So moving into the next reason as far as why sales, why software sales. And this upcoming one is honestly probably the most important one for me and really how I got into software sales in the first place. And that is getting rewarded for your work rather than trading dollars for hours. See, as I mentioned, I was making $16 an hour working at Target. And I got frustrated because I felt like, as I mentioned, I was working remarkably hard. I was not getting a raise. I was not getting a promotion. And I wasn't feeling appreciated for the work that I was doing. And so there was really, it felt like no end in sight. That is not the case with sales. Anytime you close a deal, you get compensation on top of the salary that you're signed on with. So the better you get at closing deals, the more money you can make. So yes, there are always going to be some salespeople who are lazier, some salespeople who work to become better, and there's going to be a vast difference between how much each of those people are making. But regardless, you get compensated for the work that you do, the value that you bring to the company. Ultimately, it is a salesperson's job to help people solve problems, and you get paid to help solve people's problems. So I remember there was this one person I was mentoring, and she had expressed wanting to go to school to become a dental hygienist. Trust me, we're circling back around. I asked a couple more questions about kind of career goals, where she's trying to go, and I asked her, okay, so a dental hygienist will make you about, say, $45,000 based on a just real quick Google search. Is that going to be enough for you? Or in, let's say, 2 years after making $45,000 consistently, are you going to start getting stir crazy? And she's like, well, I am pretty driven, but I really want to help people. To which my response was, that is exactly what I get paid, significantly better than $45,000 a year, to do every single day. My job is literally to help people solve problems. And whereas a dental hygienist, for example, just like most jobs, you don't get paid any better for doing an even better job. Or if you do, it's like a 50-cent raise, like was revoked from me at Target. But with sales, the more you are effective at helping people solve problems, the more money you can make. Now, we've covered a lot of reasons as far as why I'm passionate about, why I think a lot of people, if they knew about all this, would be passionate about software sales. But believe it or not, I do have a couple more. One being, it's a really low bar to get in. Now, typically for jobs that you even have a hope and a prayer of making six figures for, you have to have a college degree, and a very specific college degree, maybe advanced degrees. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's not the case with software sales. Anyone can do it, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert. And quick note on that, most people think of salespeople as extroverts. The reality is, you need to be an ambivert, or at least be able to summon an ambivert part of you. But if anything, If were a sales manager and I'm thinking, what kind of, am I looking for an introvert or an extrovert? I can only have one. I'd take an introvert, because many, many, many extroverts do not know how to shut up. And a big part of being a good sales rep is asking questions and listening. So, all that to say, despite the common thought that extroverts make the best salespeople, I disagree. I think that it's good to be able to, as I mentioned, be an ambivert. Be able to be fun, engaging, forward, but also be willing to shut up and listen and ask good questions. So another one of my favorites, I guess they're all kind of my favorites. If you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about this, but one of the things that I love about working in software sales in addition is flexibility. At the beginning of your sales career, yeah, there might be a little more, you might be working in office, you might be expected to hit certain metrics, like how many calls, how many emails, etc. But especially nowadays, more and more of these jobs and even companies are moving more flexible and or remote. So one thing I love about it is I can go in the middle of the day, especially if I have a frustrating call, I can go for a drive. I can get my hair cut in the middle of the day. I can go have lunch with my wife. Now, not all sales positions are fully remote or even flexible work. And honestly, as you start out your sales career, I do recommend in person so that you can connect with your peers, so that you can learn things at the water cooler about different product developments that are coming up, and bump shoulders with the C-suite. And there's just so much good that comes as you're starting your career. But ultimately, just like you're working towards significantly more compensation over the course of your career, you also have the option of having significantly more flexibility. Additionally, talking about flexibility, paid time off. Working at Target, I could take time off, but I had to request it many weeks out, and I was not paid for it. In the corporate world, I guess you could say, there's a concept called paid time off, where whether you're working or whether you're on paid time off, you're still getting paid your full salary. A lot of software companies, seeing as software companies tend to be the most innovative type of companies out there, at least one of them, they either have generous PTO, think say 3 weeks per year of paid time off, or there are a lot of companies, especially software, that have unlimited paid time off. And effectively what that means is, if you're getting your work done while you're on the clock, they don't care how much time off you take. Now, paid time off, frankly, is a really bad deal if you're not in sales. Because think of it like in support. If you're on the phone, customer care, answering calls all day, it's like, what is the metric for success by which I can check out and take 5 weeks of paid time off? Also, you're working on a team, and so if you're taking time off, other people are needing to cover for you. In sales, as I mentioned, it's if you're performing, there's nothing keeping you from taking paid time off. There was 1 year I took over 5 weeks off in 1 year. I did not hear a single word of skepticism, question, no beef about it. I got paid for every single day I didn't work. But in sales, again, if you're performing, you can really take advantage of that and get a significant amount of time off. Additionally, unlike a lot of entry-level jobs where you are constantly waiting and almost stressing about what hours you're going to get selected for your shifts in the upcoming weeks, and can I go with my family or friends on a boat this weekend? I don't know, because I'm still waiting for my schedule. Working in software sales, it's pretty consistently going to be Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And that's because you're typically going to be selling to businesses, and most businesses, those are the hours that they're working. So it makes sense that you're working consistently with the hours of the people you're trying to reach out to. So that is a significant amount of reasons why I'm passionate about helping people get into sales and even specifically software sales, because there is so much money to be made, so much opportunity, not just to make a lot of money, but to live a different kind of lifestyle than what most people even think is possible. Going back to my story, like, I always thought I was going to be making, say, 45,000 a year, paycheck to paycheck, dependent on, hopefully a woman would want to marry me, right? And knowing that we would also be dependent on her income, not knowing even if we could have kids from a being able to afford it standpoint, to now I don't need to worry about any of that. I have job security, I'm compensated well, I have a significant amount of flexibility, and frankly, I'm not remarkably smart or technically minded either. And so as we get into the next part of the course, it's going to be geared towards getting you prepared. What do you need to know? What do you need to learn? What should you be expecting as you're going through the interview process? I'm really excited about this next section because, again, I think that you will continue to see carryover of, I can do this. Like, nothing we are going to cover is going to be all that, oh, I couldn't do that. So anyway, I'm excited to see you on the next segment.